Chapter 11. My house is in utter disarray, and I don't feel like sitting in the chair. I think that's what's keeping me from reading, is the fact that I've been sitting in this chair, and I'm like, nah, I just want to sit here and read again. So, that's what I'm doing. Chapter 11. Darkness. Howling, battering darkness. Annabel struggled up on her knees and crouched against the base of a tree. The trunk was more than the reach of both her arms in circumference, with the wind whipping around it, tore at her almost as if she had no shelter at all. She could feel the branches straining overhead, sending tremors down to the ancient roots, tugging to dislodge them. Lightning again, a blue-white sheet of it, like the light of a beam of a gigantic searchlight. It picked out Donna, hunched under a tree too. Her mouth was open in a scream that was lost in the uproar of thunder and wind. Annabel realized her own mouth was open, and that her throat ached from sounds that couldn't be heard. She and Donna clutched at each other's hands as the darkness shut down again. Something grazed Annabel's cheek. A pebble, a twig, she didn't know what. The air was full of flying debris. Another flare of lightning. Donna pulled at her and pointed. The boys were coming at a stumbling run over the stones of the shore. Behind them, the lake was hurling itself in wild, foaming surges at their heels. This time, when the dark returned, it was not quite so thick, or else Annabel's eyes were becoming adjusted. She could still make out the running shapes and the shadow that was Donna, frantically waving them on. "Over here!" Annabel yelled, as if yelling were of any use. "Hurry!" It didn't seem to matter to anyone that the boys, Todd anyway, had meant to leave her and Donna stranded there just minutes ago. Michael was the first to gain the tree. Todd pushed in after him, shoving to claim this place nearest to the protecting trunk. A blast of thunder pressed the air from Annabel's lungs. Lightning flowed down the length of a tall pine, tracing every branch and needle in a momentary glow. Donna's voice shrilled above a lull in the wind. "House up here, just a little way." "No!" Annabel grabbed at her. Sheltering under a tree might be risky, but it had to be better than tempting whatever lay waiting in that terrible cottage. The wind rose sharply as if to silence her. Added to it was a new sound, a kind of gasp and shudder among the branches overhead. She shrank back against Todd as a limb the size of a tree crashed down only inches from them. The ground shivered with the impact. "Peel!" Todd yelled, pushing her aside. He plunged off into the woods, angling away from the fallen limb and the now charred pine. So did Michael and Donna. Then Annabel was running too. Any direction but toward that cottage, she told herself fiercely. Hadn't she glimpsed a big rock thrusting out from the trees further down the shore? A rock big enough to offer some shelter from the wind? Rain pelted her like a spray from a hose. She ducked her head and dodged from tree to tree, trying to stay parallel to the shoreline, or where she thought the shoreline was, trying to allow for the rushes of wind that staggered her off course. Daggers of lightning startled her into unintended detours. Wildly raking branches barred her way here, sprang up to let her pass there. She realized slowly that she was on a path. A track of pale gravel laid down through the trees. Gravel. The feel of it under her sandals woke a horrid memory. She turned to escape to the left, but the way was blocked by a tangle of dead wood. To the right, a row of close-set trunks hemmed her like palisades. She ran on, searching each side for a break. Without warning, the trees gave way in front of her. She was in the open. The gravel path, more distinct now, unwound ahead of her across the pine-ridged clearing to where the cottage sat, waiting. She fought in vain to turn back. The wind swooped in behind her and lifted her onwards as if she were late for an appointment. Michael, Donna, and Todd came spilling out of the woods, following the gravel path, too. They all tumbled into the weathered front stoop together. The top of a birch tree sailed over the yard after them to lodge like a barricade against the bottom step. "We can't get in," Annabelle yelled in one final effort to fend off the inevitable. "It's locked! Nailed shut!" She knew a flicker of hope as Todd wrenched at the door without success. "Let's go round back," she motioned the way, "behind the house. They would be cut off from the wind there, and much of the pounding rain. We don't have to go in. Look out, will you?" Todd was wielding a heavy stick. With a single surprisingly expert swing, he shattered the glass in the door. Another 2 or 3 blows knocked out most of the jagged pieces that remained. He reached inside, undid the bolt, and turned the knob. Before he could let go, the door blew inward, dragging him along. The same gust caught Annabelle. She clutched at the doorframe to stop herself, but Donna and Michael slammed into her from behind, and she lost her hold. It was as if the house inhaled them in a large gulp. "Shut it!" Todd was shouting from across the room beyond the reach of the blowing rain. "Shut the door!" Billowing draperies snapped like whips. The old rocker by the window started furious rocking. A magazine that had laid untouched for years sped flapping toward Todd like a vengeful bird. "The door!" Todd bellowed. "Shut the door!" Michael hurled his weight against it and forced it shut. Once the uproar of the storm was throttled down to what wind and rain contained to the drive-in through the broken pane. At once, the uproar of the storm was throttled down to what wind and rain continued to drive in through the broken pane. But the energy rampaging through Julia Craig's front room was not that quick to subside. The rocking chair rocked on, inching further from its corner, with each forward lurch. The magazine fluttered at Todd's feet as if it would rise again, and Donna strangled to loosen the loop of tattered drape that had circled around her neck like a noose. "Look out!" Michael's warning sent Annabelle leaping sideways just as a pitcher in a massive frame left the wall in a pitch onto the spot where she had been standing. Michael, dodging it too, slipped on the wet floor and went down hard amid the shards of glass from the door. When he scrambled up, it was onto one knee. His hands were clasped over the other, blood welling between his fingers. "Nice going, Julia, baby." Todd kicked the magazine toward the rocker. "Scrag a Peterson, or blow in your image." Scrag a Peterson, or blow your image. Oh, scrag a Peterson, or blow your image. "Don't!" Annabelle's heart was jammed so far up in her throat that she could barely scrape the word past it. Todd produced his whinnying laugh. "Do what? Bug an old cow that's so long gone you can't even smell her?" "Todd, shut up!" Donna swept a nervous glance around the storm-darkened room as she sank to a crouch beside Michael. "Shut up, please!" Her rain-wet neck bore a mark where the dusty drape had wrapped it. "You think old Lady Craig's gonna pop out of the woodwork too?" Todd's tone was withering. "Maybe along with the Tooth Fairy or one of Santa's elves? We can have her busted for trespassing if she does. Grandpa owns this place, not her." He wrapped his knuckles against the wall. "Hear that, Julia, baby? Mess with us, and we'll blow the whistle on you." house rattled from top to bottom as if his knocking had shaken it loose from its foundations. Thunder rolled and faded. The wind hushed for an instant, and a new sound grew in the room. "Listen." Michael looked up sharply from the Kleenex Donna had given him to press against his knee. "The clock's ticking. It wasn't doing that before." Annabelle was already fumbling behind her for the doorknob. "We have to get out of here." But her fingers didn't seem to close in on anything. A tingle crawled along her spine's nerves, raising the hairs on the back of her neck as if she had touched a low-voltage wire. Something struck against the house. Was it something upstairs? The attic door stood open. Donna uttered a single gasp as she was pointing to the rocking chair. A glowing ball of bluish light hovered on the seat. As Annabelle stared, it bounced to the chair arm and bounced again to the cat basket on the door seal. "Keep away!" Todd shrilled as the thing bounced to the floor and started gliding over the moth-eaten carpet. Annabelle abandoned hope of escaping through the front door before the thing reached it. "Out the back way," she croaked in what was meant to be a shout. "Run!" Donna dragged Michael up by his arm. He came 2 steps, and the injured knee buckled under him. Annabelle sprang to catch him by the other arm. Perhaps that was Todd's intent too. Perhaps he didn't simply barrel into them in a blind rush to save himself, but the 4 of them were knocked sprawlingly. Donna and Michael in one direction, and Todd and Annabelle in the other. Annabelle regained her feet only to be sent staggering backward by another shove from Todd. "Out of the way!" The ball had bobbed in between them and the other 2. Todd sidestepped left, then right, trying to edge past it, but it headed off each attempt. At the same time, it continued to advance on him with a menacing electric cackle. Annabelle, behind him, was forced to back step by step as he did. He gave her no opening to try a break of her own. The doorway rose up around her. Her heel bumped against the stair riser, the attic stairs. She fought to stand as Todd crowed, crowded backward into her. Nothing could drive her up those stairs. Todd's elbow jabbed her fiercely in the stomach. "Move, you stupid cow!" Annabelle's wince cost her her stand. Sparks snapped from the oncoming ball, and Todd slammed the door shut. Annabelle was trapped with him in the narrow, dark stairwell. Anger kindled beneath her terror. The impulse to fling the door open and him through it, to clear a path for her own escape, was almost overwhelming. She was actually groping past him to find the door when the need to grope retreated. The darkness was thickening fast, yielding to a murky light that seemed to be growing out of nowhere. It was light enough now to see her question chalked on Todd's face. That thing on the floor, on the other side of the door, could strain itself through the wood to get on this, or could the thing? And it could strain through the wood to get to this side? They turned and fled together up the cramped stairs, but the light was stronger up here. The milky kind of radiance filled the attic, yet somehow failed to banish any of the shadows. The brightest spot was the old mirror against the chimney. Excuse me. See my nails? I did it blue and pink. See? Blue and pink. Told you, boring and colorful. I like boring and colorful. Alright. Annabelle chilled at the sight of her reflection there. It had to be hers. Those are her faded denim shorts and her orange top on the mirrored figure, but her new hairstyle. Wind and rain had beaten it to where she was no longer an Annie Craig look-alike. Looking from the oval of the tarnished gilt frame was a living portrait of Annie Craig. The milky light surrounding the reflection began to swirl like flecks on a snowstorm paperweight. A shifting blur at first, a thickening mist, a discernible form, and then Julia Craig stood beside her in the mirror, smiling as she had in the photograph Uncle Axel had destroyed. Her arm lay across Annabelle's shoulders, in that same possessive pose, but without quite touching her, yet. Annabelle stared, spellbound. The noise from the storm on the roof was deafening. Through it, though, the whisper swelled, vibrant, inviting. Annie! What if she accepted that invitation? One step, two, another sound tugged at her mind, choking, someone gasping for air. She couldn't tear her eyes from the mirror, but now she was looking harder into its depths. Where was Todd? Would he be reflected there too? He hadn't been more than half a pace behind her. Julia's Craig image wavered briefly, and Todd appeared, but insubstantial and gray, like a double exposure. He was contorted, dimly, but desperately, in a battle for breath. Julia Craig's form steadied, sharpened, and blotting him out. No! Annabelle was startled by the ring of her own voice. Not that she owed Todd anything, but he was a human being at least. Annie! An element of command slid into the whisper. Annabelle's breathing was nearly as ragged as Todd's, but her capacity for cowering had been stretched to its limits. No! She dropped to a crouch that ducked her reflection from under Julia's tightening embrace. Not Annie! Annabelle! Annie's dead! A shimmer, like a ripple on the water, passed over the mirror. Annabelle braced for she didn't know what. Her fingers brushed and closed on something. A book on the floor. Perhaps the very one she had pulled from the bookshelves her first time here. Annie's dead, she repeated, as the clear-cut image of Julia Craig began to shred along the edges into milling flecks of light again. You'll never have her back. There isn't any Annie anymore. As she spoke, the light beyond the mirror swirled in toward it, breaking into particles and swarming like infuriated bees over Annabelle's reflection. She heard a moan mounting to a shriek. The floor shuddered beneath her. The roof opened above her. She sprang up, hurling the book full force against the glass, and was borne down into darkness by a crushing rush of air. Stillness. Utter stillness. That was what she was first aware of when her senses began, bit by bit, to return. No storm. No voices. No eerie whisperings. A heaviness weighed on her shoulders. Another rested across the back of her legs. She had an impression that a lot of time had gone by. Hours, perhaps? Or days? Or century? Little arrows of pain shot up her neck when she tried to turn her head. She opened her eyes to a fretwork of daylight slanting through what appeared to be a low canopy of pine boughs. Yes, she was lying on the boards of the attic floor. She moved her head again, testing. It hurt, but she could do it, and move her arms and her legs as well. Slowly, awkwardly, with frequent pauses to grit her teeth against a surprised pain, she squirmed herself free of the branches that held her captive. She really was still in the attic, but the attic was a shambles. The chimney was a pile of rubble. A portion of mild blue sky showed through a gap where part of the roof was gone. Beneath it, fragments of broken mirror glittered on the floor. One of the big bookcases lay flat on its face. The other leaned above it. Most of its books tumbled from the shelves. The wardrobe that had so long presented its back to the world was tilted around to display a tier of sagging drawers. And jammed diagonally across the space from the stairway to the chimney sprawled a giant white pine, its trunk thicker than the rafters that had splintered in its fall. Annabelle swallowed. Her body felt like one big bruise laced by smarting cuts and scratches, but nothing seemed seriously out of order. It would have been a different story had she been struck down by that main trunk instead of only the springy, lightweight upper branches. Missed again, Julia, she thought shakily. Then she remembered Todd. She found him by following the sound of labored breathing, a sound she'd been hearing all along without registering it. His eyes were open, staring up at her. When she pulled aside the branches that hid him, there was no recognition in the stare. She wasn't sure he was actually conscious. Better if he wasn't, she thought. When she saw how a split fork was closed like a vice on his ankle, she didn't have a prayer of forcing those stout branches apart enough to set him free. I was hardly a prime concern, though. When he was as gray as the mirror had shown him and gasping for each breath as if he were drowning, what if he should die right here in front of her? She stared. She started a frenzied shifting through the pine needles and twigs, chunks of mortar and other litter on the floor. Hadn't he been gripping his inhaler in that glimpse of him in the mirror? It had to be near him somewhere. It was, flattened and useless under a stone from the chimney. She couldn't go for help. The only way down from the attic was the stairs, and the densest part of the tree filled the place where they ought to be. Donna and Michael, what had become of them? She held her breath, listening for a movement downstairs. There was nothing, only the same unnatural silence, as if everything in the world had stopped, been shut off. "Donna! Michael!" she shouted. The silence only pressed in tighter. She shouted again, directing her voice down the stairwell, as close as she could get to it, and again out through the opening in the roof, until it was too much like the day she was lost in the woods and had shouted herself hoarse with no one to hear. For within an hour's time there grew up all around the park a twist of such a vast number of trees, neither man nor beast could pass through. Except that on that day there had been someone who did hear her at last. Her hand slid into the pocket of her shorts, where she tucked old Pa's compass this morning for safekeeping. Just the solid, smooth feel of it drew away some of her panic. Maybe she couldn't get out of here by herself, but there was nothing that said she couldn't try. Nothing, provided. Oh, Lord, not right now, buddy. Let me finish this. It's just a few inches. Maybe she couldn't get out of here by herself, but there was nothing that said she couldn't try. Nothing, provided it was beyond Julia Craig's powers to reassemble that mirror. The crunch of mortar grit and slivers of glass set Annabelle's teeth on edge as she began a slow turn in quest of anything that she might use for an axe or a saw. Gravel underfoot and mist-shrouded folding doors, the vision shuddered through her mind. Then, a quarter turn more, and the vision was real. She was standing where she had stood that night, looking in through those gaping doors. It didn't matter that after the first jolt of recognition she could see them in the daylight for what they were, a broad bookcase, knocked forward and propped at a tipsy angle from its own spilled books. An old wardrobe spun outward into the room and away from the wall it had faced. Daylight showed her, too, what had beckoned her from the blackness beyond them. What had beckoned her from the blackness beyond them that other time. Sorry guys, I missed what I was reading. If you didn't understand it, well, I should improve. You didn't get this far anyway. Grandmas are imperfect creatures, and I'm not doing perfection. That's not human. Even so, she could have mistaken it for a heap of colored rags back under the eaves, except for the pale skull mocking her from eyeless sockets with fixed forever grin. That's it of that chapter. So guys, I got distracted at the end.